Good morning, everyone, and welcome. And I hope everyone has been staying warm enough and, and weathering through this weather. It's nice to see the sunshine, and it's nice to see so many smiling faces this morning. So welcome, and we will call this meeting to order. Sarah.
It's on. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. Delighted to have you all here for our February Commission meeting, and as always, I'll provide just a few updates. The first one is we began, all division leadership and administration began our winter round of regional staff meetings, and so had our first one last Friday in the Southwest region. Had an opportunity to meet with staff there and looking forward to making our way to the remaining 7 regions and including central office as well over the next couple of months as we talk about the state of the department, in which we're providing a high-level briefing on several key department issues. Then we also participate in division breakouts and discuss the critical topic of relevancy of nature and of conservation to all the citizens that we serve. And you're going to have an opportunity from Jason Sumners today to see the presentation that he's providing to our regional staff. I want to talk for a minute about CWD targeted culling. The department's winter targeted culling activities are underway. We have harvested over 500 deer and have received test results from just over 200 deer. We've confirmed 2 CWD positives from the culling efforts, one in the Macon-Lynn core area and one in the St. Clair core area. Staff are meeting with landowners in close proximity to CWD positives to provide information and answer questions, and I want to sincerely thank the staff who are involved in those winter culling operations. Critically important work. Also, I'm thrilled that just last week, more than 20 of your department leadership members recently completed an intensive 3-day Missouri Way training program in which all state of Missouri agencies are going through this. It's focused on advanced management skills in 3 focus areas: leading self, leading others, and leading change. The next class, which will involve 20 of our team members, will be in March. On to emergency response. This winter weather has kept us on our toes. We know that even from the temperatures outside today. In addition to bitter cold temperatures, flooding and the potential for water rescue efforts is something that we'll be monitoring across parts of the state over the next few days. I want to thank Protection Field Chief Dean Hare for stepping up to serve as Protection Division Liaison to MDC's Emergency Incident Command Team. Dean, as we know, is very familiar with the structure of the Incident Command and brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to this role. I am certainly hoping for a little warmer day on March the 1st, when thousands of anglers will make their way to the water for opening day of trout season. Our staff play a critically important role in this tradition, everything from the countless hours of prep work that occurs during the off-season to welcoming new anglers, to the excitement and sharing stories with many seasoned anglers that have been there to their opening day at whatever their favorite trout park is for decades and decades. Opening day is truly special and leads to lasting memories that our staff have had a hand in creating for generations. I see Bruce in the crowd and Brian, so please thank your teams for all of their work in preparing for opening day. Very excited to be there. I'll be at Bennett this year. Want to mention, of course, the MONASP State Tournament is coming up. Now more than 700 schools involved in the MONASP program in Missouri. The state tournament will again be held in Branson and is scheduled to take place on March 22nd and 23rd. This will be an exciting weekend of competition for young archers to showcase their skills. We're expecting between 3,200 and 3,500 students at the event, and want to thank all of those that make this such a successful weekend for participants and their families, and I think you will be there as well. And of course, we always want to thank our Heritage Foundation for the important role that they play in sponsoring the tournament and all the activities that go with that. I wanted to mention also that I started this week on Sunday, had the opportunity to fly out to DC and to speak with brand new, wet behind the ears state Fish and Wildlife Agency directors. We are seeing a record turnover in number of new state Fish and Wildlife directors, or in those director positions. There's 20 new state Fish and Wildlife directors right now. So I had an opportunity to go out and speak to about 8 of them, just about things going on here in Missouri. I mean, that is one of the benefits of the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, is just to share information with one another. I shared with them the importance of working together as a team, encouraging one another even on the tough days. I also mentioned the need to take time to develop an agency-wide strategic plan, why it's so important with limited resources that you know what your priorities are. So we talked through that. Also, how important it is to measure those checkpoints and measure your progress in that regard. Also spoke about needing to understand why conservation and nature must be relevant from the variety of barriers they face as directors. Finally, I reminded them, as I try to remind myself, to make sure that you're also taking time to care for themselves so that they have the energy to provide leadership. The work of this agency has never been easy, and our work is not done, but it's always an honor to stand before a group of my peers and give credit to the great work the staff here in Missouri continue to do with tremendous passion. We are doing great things. They recognize that and asked if we could come out and present to their commissions on what we're doing here in Missouri. So more to come in that regard. I finally it's always fun to highlight where staff are being recognized for the amazing work that they do. And so I don't know if Mr. John Tuttle's in the room. Is he? I'm gonna make you stand up for just a minute. I had the opportunity to find out yesterday that Mr. Tuttle was awarded this year's Carcagni Award for his amazing career. This is the highest honor bestowed on members by the Missouri Society of American Foresters. So congratulations, John. And finally, to announce, I don't see him yet in the crowd, but our own Travis McLean was named this week as the next Protection Division Field Chief, and so congratulations to Travis for that as well. Unless there are questions, Madam Chair, that's my report.
Thank you, Sarah. Commissioners, questions, comments? Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, staff who participated in these culling activities, especially in this kind of weather. Critically important to our CWD program, and we appreciate what you do. So thank you, and we will move on to the next item, which is the consent calendar, and it is an action item, and if we have anyone objecting to anything on the item, we will remove it, but we will need an action item to approve and move on.
So moved, Madam Chair.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Next item. Jason, welcome.
Morning, Commissioners, Director. It's my pleasure, quite frankly, to stand before you and talk about some work that we are heavily engaged in terms of thinking critically and strategically about how we grow and strengthen the conservation community, not only in this state, but across the country. So this, I think, is, when we talk about relevancy, should be viewed as an opportunity to say, hey, how do we engage more folks and think about that critically. I want to start with this question. Relevancy certainly gets thrown out there as to what it means, and so I'm going to walk you through a thought process that we as a larger group have been working through to try to provide some clarity on where we're going in terms of what do we mean by relevance. So I think it's important to start with, you know, the scientist in the room has to throw Charles Darwin up there, but it's not the strongest species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one that's responsive to change. And so as we think about the way things have changed, it's important to think about the way that we have characterized conservation in North America. We have traditionally thought of those things as being wildlife population management, habitat management, activities that protect sensitive species, how we allocate access and opportunities to animals that we harvest, and then certainly how we enforce regulations as the cornerstone of the way we do conservation. But we know the way that that's been executed has changed tremendously over the decades. If we think about the time in which our resources were being heavily exploited and forests were being over-harvested, You know, the Roosevelt era of land protection and fire suppression and those kinds of things was a huge step forward in conservation. The 1930s, a big change was the formation of many conservation agencies and the realization that we had to have enforceable regulations to protect those resources. The 1960s, when we moved into the conversation about environmental quality, away from just kind of protected species and protecting forest, was a huge change for the conservation community. The 1980s, the rise of human dimensions and the way we think about how we gather public input to make resource management decisions. 1990s, recognition of the importance of engaging the public and how we do that in terms of outreach. And even more recently, the movement towards landscape and natural community management has been one that has challenged us as a conservation community. We could even add in disease response as something that has challenged the way we have historically thought about how we do conservation. But through that time, the public that we worked with was pretty similar in many of those changes. But we know over the last century that our society has changed dramatically. We've become much more urbanized. We have increasing minority populations and certainly cultural diversity, increasing lack of trust in government, and that resulting detachment from nature. So as we continue to look forward, the people we have brought along with us or who have come along with us in the conservation movement are becoming a smaller and smaller portion of our society. So how do we continue to respond to these changes? If we look at who we have historically engaged, the graphs here are graphs that many of you have seen before. They reflect, the one on the left reflects our conservationist readership. Largely an aging population, most of them over 60, largely a white population, and heavily male. We know that, you know, only 1 in 6 Missourians we have connected with at our nature centers. Only 1 in 4 Missourians hunt. 1 in 3 Missourians say that they watch wildlife. We know our hunters, you can see on the graph here, we have a huge baby boomer population that is aging out. And so we have to ask those questions of, does the population that we're interacting with look like our population? And then who are we missing? And just ask the question of why. And how might we better engage them in this thing that we care so much about that we call conservation. One of the important topics of conversation that staff in many places are already beginning to have is, how do we connect with folks with terms that resonate with them, not necessarily the terms that we have always used to describe conservation, from the provisioning of services, regulating services like flood retention and recharge of water. We know that things like clean air and clean water are what resonate with broad audiences today. That it was not true of a few decades ago. And so how do we start to move to where they are instead of sticking to where we are? And so as we ask ourselves, we know what we say and what we have interest in. In many cases, we don't always understand what the broader public knows and has an interest in. And in order for us to stay relevant, we've got to find that middle ground, because we certainly don't want this to be the voice of the future, right? Conservation, hello, I'm completely irrelevant, because we have not recognized the demands or the desires that some of our other publics that we serve might have. So we many times get the question, what does this have to do with our mission? Because many of us take great pride in the first part of the message, to protect and manage the fish, forest, and wildlife resources of the state. But I think the second part is equally important. It's to facilitate and provide opportunities for all citizens to use, enjoy, and learn about these resources. And we all know an engaged public that cares about them makes protecting our fish, forest, and wildlife a heck of a lot easier, right? And so I think they very much go hand in hand. So this work is not new. There have been decades of trying to think about how we engage the public more effectively, how we meet them where they are. But the recent focus on it is really the result of the Blue Ribbon Panel recommendation that was rolled out in March of 2016. They had 2 recommendations. Many of you fully aware of the recommendation to support through additional funding conservation agencies, and we currently see that as the Recovering America's Wildlife Act. But at the time, the panel also recognized that that was only going to work if state agencies were able to transform themselves so that those programs that they provide engage and serve broader constituencies. And so this second recommendation is then again the work that we've been engaged with for about the last year. So the work currently sets based on a Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies recommendation that was approved by the directors in September. Part of the Blue Ribbon Panel Relevancy Working Group, Steve Williams with Wildlife Management Institute and Tony Wassley, the director of Nevada's Division of Wildlife, are the champions of this effort. We have state director champions, Eric Sutton in Florida, our very own Director Pauly here, Paul Johansson in West Virginia, Gordon Myers in North Carolina, and unfortunately, due to the nature of the changeover in directors, Bob Broscheid, who was originally a part of the director championship, no longer is with that agency. He's moved on to Arizona Parks, and so there's another important key member here from Alberta that has been added as a director champion as well. The way we're doing the work is we have a coordinating team. Ann Fortunton is a human dimension specialist for the Florida Game and Fish, Jen Newmark in Nevada, myself, Elsa Halbolt works for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Many of you will recognize Mark Humpert's name, Wildlife Diversity work with AFWA. And then Matt Dunphy and Chris Smith are kind of our, for lack of a better term, guiding stars. They are helping us stay focused as a group. Many of you will recognize Matt Dunphy, the work that he did on the R3 program, and so he's providing that framework as we develop this path forward. So those are really kind of the folks doing the work, but behind the scenes we've got a team of more than about 80 folks that are involved in each one of those relevancy strategy teams. So as we've ground through trying to figure out what is relevancy for state fish and wildlife agencies, we ultimately ended on this end goal. But again, it really is about conservation, but we're only going to get there through broader engagement. And so ensuring that we are engaging with the publics that are making the decisions now and into the future. So our approach is that this has been a lot of difficult, critical thinking in terms of what's really holding us back and how do we hand something to a state that gives them a path forward that they can develop a reasonable approach to handling this challenge. So where we landed was a voluntary pathway and action states can implement to improve services to broader constituencies. And it should be pretty well applicable to all conservation institutions. Certainly it's a State Fish and Wildlife Agency focused approach, but as we have worked through this, we've got Fish and Wildlife Service, Forest Service, we've got a number of conservation-related NGOs. They can see how this works and reflects back to the challenges that their agencies or organizations face as well. And so it's intended to try to move the conservation community forward. It's really important that this effort is attempted to not be prescriptive nor judgmental. We each find ourselves in a slightly different condition. We have a constitutional commission. Others don't. We have the luxury of the sales tax, which allows us some capacity things. Others don't. And so every agency will find themselves in a little bit of a different spot. And so it's not to say you have to do this. It's to think about what parts of these barriers actually apply to you. And again, it's been an attempt to be broadly inclusive. As I mentioned, state, federal, NGOs, private landowners, industry folks are involved in this conversation as well. And an important part here is that sharing successes. Because as we go through these, there have been many of these barriers that folks have attempted to tackle. Some with success, some with opportunities to learn. And so how do we coalesce all of that into one spot that we can figure out a way to move forward? So we're approaching this problem through this strategy team approach and bucketing the barriers. We've laid out 2 to 4 strategies for each one of those barriers and really a results change like approach to figure out what are the real actual steps that need to be taken to address these strategies so that we can identify the real tactics and actions. You give staff in most state fish and wildlife agencies the tactics and the actions to do, and they can implement them. But it's helping us do the hard thinking of what are the most important tactics and actions. So this slide is really, really busy, and it's not intended for you guys to look at it, but to give you some insight into, you're gonna see just a small little blip of bullets of barriers, but there's a lot of work that's been done behind those to help break down what's the real challenge, what's the root cause of where we're trying to go. So in the orange box, you'll see the barrier. In this case, a lack of agency expertise. The yellow box there is a strategy. How do we overcome that? And then that step by step things that need to be done to get to that goal where staff have an understanding of why it's important to engage broader audiences. And again, with that end goal of enhanced conservation through broader engagement. So these buckets of barriers, they're really arbitrary buckets, but they have general themes to them that speak to some of these issues. And we think about it, as Director Pauly frequently says, how do we unlock the gates? How do we open the gates? What's holding us back from doing these things that are necessary to engage broader audiences? So the groups are broke up into things that revolve around agency capacity, the culture of the agency to change or engage more broadly, our constituents' capacity to engage, constituent culture, and then the political constraints that might exist. So I'm going to show you just a few brief slides of where we are with these refined barriers. And I'll say, I just got back from earlier this week being in South Carolina with all the strategy teams and grinding through all of these barriers and seeing where overlap occurs. This is now out of date to some extent. We have consolidated and refined. But when we talk about agency capacity, lack of political capital with traditional constituents to change the status quo so they can serve all citizens. We don't have that challenge in many cases, but in some places we do feel that, the giving up or loss of power. Agency culture, things that have emerged through this process is that, at times structures and hiring practices designed to maintain the status quo. They may not be advantageous to folks who think or look differently than us. The capacity of our constituents to understand the importance of conservation. Many cases, they lack an understanding of the way nature improves quality of life. So how do we start to peel that back and strategically think about it? Constituent culture. Many cases, agencies or organizations lack the understanding of how cultural differences affect participation in fish and wildlife conservation and or outdoor recreation. So again, that's back to thinking about socially, how do the cultural things impact the way that we might engage them or think and talk about the things that they have interest in. And then at the bottom, again, traditional constituents' fear of loss of power and control. That's a huge barrier in many places. Political and legal constraints, the values, demographic, recreational interests, and experience of boards and commissions many times are not representative of broad constituents. Many states have very specific criteria in which their commission has to be structured around. And so that can be a constraint in some places. And as I mentioned earlier, in many places, the at-will nature of state agency leadership compromise implementation efforts. The average lifespan of a director today is, 2.5 years, 3 years? I mean, it's a very short time frame. And so as you talk about some of these, we're not talking about changes that are going to occur over a couple of years. We're in this transition for the long term, and so that can be really, really tough in terms of consistency, especially as we talk about agency culture. So a sampling of current activities, we take great pride in having engaged broader publics. We're doing that. We're doing a lot of good work. The Partners Roundtable, this last go-around had folks that we have traditionally not engaged, which is a huge growth. Human dimensions research and work, we've long been in that game, and we're thinking about what's the next stage of understanding social things. Our community conservation work is absolutely part of this story. Urban conservation planners, they're working with communities to try to figure out ways to move forward. Green space initiatives, those kinds of things are huge parts of how we connect with folks where they are. Certainly, everyone hopes the Recovering America's Wildlife Act will move forward. That would increase capacity. Continued support and participation in the National Conservation Leadership Institute, NCLI, other groups that are thinking more broadly about this real question. And I think it's also important to note, hunter and angler recruitment, retention, and reactivation is an important part of this story. We're not leaving them behind in the process. I think that's what some folks get hung up on, is that we're trying to engage newer audiences, but as we do that, it's important that we make sure we bring those that have always been with us along as well. And so it's absolutely an important part of this relevancy conversation. But it begs the question of how do we think about those things a little differently? And we see that. Staff are thinking creatively about how they engage families into that process. So next term steps, we'll be presenting a draft of the barriers and strategies next month at the North American to the directors to make sure, kind of a pulse check of where we are in process, make sure that the product we're putting together is what they're looking for. We had a test run of that on Monday to the wildlife diversity coordinators, got very, very positive feedback in terms of the approach. They can see where we're going. We need some clarification of language so that it's interpreted better. But overall, really good. So once we get done meeting with the directors, the strategy teams will get back together and start working on identifying tactics. And our hope that would be that we would have to draft roadmap together for the director's review by AFWA in September. Then that will lead us into this opportunity for early adopting states to say, okay, now how do we do it? How do we take this roadmap and put it into a strategic plan for us to more broadly engage? You know, our approach of adding a relevancy coordinator will certainly help, and I think the timing there will be really, really critical. And there's just additional information on fishandwildlife.org. If you search the relevancy roadmap, there's details there about the strategy teams, all the individuals that are involved with the strategy teams, so you can see the diversity of folks that are going, and then as we move forward. So again, what is relevancy for state fish and wildlife agencies? Our kind of guiding star has been enhanced conservation through broader engagement. So that's the focus of most of those questions. So I'll leave you again. It's not new. We have changed before. This is just a new growth area for us, and it's a new opportunity, and frankly, I think it's one that's pretty exciting. So be happy to take any questions if you guys have them.
Commissioners, questions, comments?
I'm very eager to learn more about the recommendations of this committee. As an implementer of ideas, I'm sensitive to the needs for money and personnel to implement those ideas, and it'll be interesting to see where we get with that, how to advise the commission as we figure out how to invest what finite resources we've got to accomplish these things. It's helpful to look beyond the far horizon, though. Thanks.
That is often the question that we get, and we had that from the wildlife diversity coordinators. Are you guys going to prioritize them? Which is a little bit of a slippery slope that we don't want to project that this is what you need to do. But there are definitely some of those that are critical, and it gets back to how do we prioritize the work we have to do, and how do we have those difficult conversations. That's why I think it's timely with where we are in the strategic plan. It's what's the work we really need to be doing, what's the most important things, and this gives us that framework, another layer of when we talk about how we're going to connect with citizens to filter those things through and make some well-informed decisions.
Commissioner Bedell?
Great work, Jason, and in addition to that, it's always nice to hear you give a presentation because you do an outstanding job.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason. It's exciting to see all the involvement of many, many people in this whole opportunity that we have, and an important work that we're doing, because we do need our non-traditional people involved as well. It's the wave of the future.
Yep, and how do we figure out ways that we connect directly with them? Not
Exactly.
necessarily the way we've
Exactly.
always tried to.
I know of no other state agency that seeks the public's involvement and input better than this department. So thank you for all the work and the commitment from staff that's willing to listen and work towards those changes. So
Yeah, there's no
appreciate
question
it.
that I'm just but a small piece of it. We've got lots of staff asking really, really hard questions. It's been really eye-opening to me, and it'll be even more eye-opening as we go out to more of the regional staff meetings, the things that staff are working on, and how we kind of draw that all together and continue to head in a positive direction. So
Well,
thank
we're
you
all one piece of that puzzle, so thank you very much. Next up is Mike with regulations. Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Director. The Regulations Committee met on January 8th of 2019 for their annual review of the Wildlife Code. Recommendations for 2019-2020 code changes were reviewed by the committee and presented today for your approval. Proposed amendments for Commission consideration are listed in the action items beginning on the first page of the Regulations Committee report. Copies of each proposed amendment with associated justifications and a preferred effective date are appended. Unless otherwise noted, the preferred effective date for these changes is March 1 of 2020. Those designated to be effective as soon as possible have an anticipated effective date of August 30 of 2019. Commissioners, as a reminder, your approval of these recommendations signifies the first step in the Department of Conservation's rulemaking process. Following your vote today, all proposed rulemakings will be filed with the Secretary of State's office for publication either as proposed amendments or final orders of rulemaking. Following publication in the Missouri Register, those filed as proposed amendments will be open for a formal 30-day public comment period. Rules establishing seasons, dates, and limits will be filed as final orders of rulemaking and not subject to the public comment period. Comments received on specific proposed amendments will be compiled and presented as part of formal orders of rulemaking for Commission consideration at your meeting in May. As previously instructed, for amendments that do not receive comments, no further action by the Commission is necessary, and staff are authorized by the Commission to file the final order of rulemaking. Unless you have questions regarding this process, I'll move on to the formal action items.
Questions, comments?
Thank you. Recall that some time ago, administration was made aware of a typographical error that resulted in an inaccurate reference to state statute in the authority section of multiple regulations in the Wildlife Code. As rules are opened for other changes, staff were instructed to correct the inaccurate references. Please note that 2 of the proposed amendments presented for your consideration today contain this correction in addition to the recommended changes that you'll be asked to vote on. Those rules are 3 CSR 10-4.117, prohibited species, and 10-10.743, commercial establishments. Madam Chair, to keep discussions organized and to ensure clarity, I'd like to address the proposed changes by groups. I'll begin with proposed amendment to 3 CSR 10-10.743, commercial establishments, brought forward by Protection Division. This amendment removes bears from the list of wildlife which may be bought, possessed, transported, and sold by commercial establishments. This change will close a loophole and reduce the risk of Missouri's expanding bear population becoming part of a commercial enterprise. Fisheries Division brought forward the next set of proposed changes. Proposed amendments to 10-4.117, prohibited species, and 10-9.110, general prohibition applications, would update the scientific names of certain species of crayfish based on changes to classifications published in the Journal of Crustacean Biology in 2017. Proposed changes to 10-11.205, fishing methods hours, would correct the time frame when the James A. Reed Memorial Wildlife Area is open for fishing during daylight savings time, and modified dates when youth fishing opportunities are available at the Lost Valley Fish Hatchery to coincide with visitor center hours of operation. Madam Chair, I would request Commission approval of 10-10.743, commercial establishments, 10-4.117, prohibited species, 10-9.110, general prohibition applications, and 10-11.205, fishing methods and hours as described.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. Next, a proposed amendment to 10-6.505, black bass, would change the minimum length limit for spotted bass from 15 to 12 inches on Stockton Lake. This change will increase opportunities for anglers and bring regulations at Stockton lake in line with those in place on 4 of Missouri's other large reservoirs. Commissioners, crappie populations at Smithville and Wapapello lakes are being negatively impacted by large numbers of crappie that do not meet current length limit restrictions. To address this issue and facilitate harvest of those fish, Fisheries Division proposes changes to 10-6.515 crappie that would liberalize the daily limit for crappie on Smithville Lake from 15 to 30 fish and establish a length limit restriction of not more than 15 fish over 9 inches in total length on Smithville and Wapapello lakes. The next proposed amendment to 10-11.210, fishing daily and possession limits, will establish daily and possession limits for fish other than those designated as endangered or game on Daniel Boone and William R. Logan conservation areas, Reef Schneider State Forest, and William G. and Irma Park White Memorial Wildlife Area. Commissioners, as you know, the department has a long history of working with other public entities through community assistance programs, or CAP agreements, to ensure all citizens have access to quality, close-to-home fishing opportunities. Fishing Division introduced one proposed amendment to 10-12.140, fishing, daily and possession limits, that would establish daily and possession limits for fish on Lake Lincoln at Quiver River State Park, which is managed by the department under a CAP agreement. Madam Chair, I request Commission approval of 10-6.505 black bass, 10-6.515 crappie, 10-11.210 fishing daily and possession limits, and 10-12.140 fishing daily and possession limits as described.
Madam Chair, I move for approval.
And a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. Wildlife Division submitted the next set of proposed amendments to the Wildlife Code. Commissioners, during high water events along the Mississippi and St. Francis rivers, deer, turkey, and other wildlife are forced out of their natural habitats into locations where they are extremely vulnerable to hunting. Through a significant cooperative effort, Wildlife and Protection Division staff in the Southeast region brought forward a proposed amendment that will provide refuge for wildlife during significant flood events in southeast Missouri. I've asked Conservation Agent Brian Shelton to provide an overview of the issues in southeast Missouri and proposed wildlife code changes you'll consider today. Agent Shelton began his career with MDC as an hourly employee in Private Land Service Division in 2006. In 2011, he was accepted into the Conservation Agent Training Academy and was assigned to Pemiscot County, where he serves today. Agent Shelton is very involved in his southeast Missouri community and serves as a fireman for the Crothersville Fire Department. At this time, I'll ask Conservation Agent Brian Shelton to take the podium. Brian, it's all yours.
Brian, welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Hopefully your all's morning is good, and I'm glad that everybody's in here and warm, so it's a little chilly outside. Like Deputy Director Hubbard said, I'm Brian Shelton, and also I have with me Ross Glenn, who's a resource forester, and Tim Cavan, he's a private lands conservationist. If you don't mind, can you all stand up for just a second? Just really quick, these two guys are very important to this project, and they're smart. I mean, I mean, what else can I say? You all can sit down now. Between maps and different things like that, these guys were a huge part of hopefully the success of this proposal, and putting numbers on and maps together and everything else. But today, if I can get it, oh, wrong one. There we go. Today I'm going to give a quick presentation on the Southeast Missouri Flood Regulation Proposal. I want to start off by thanking you, the director, deputy directors, Jeff City Administration, our supervisors from all divisions in Southeast region from the field up, and most importantly, the commission for considering this proposal. I like to keep things pretty casual, so if you have any questions at all through the proposal, or through the presentation, please feel free to ask. All right, I'm going to start off by talking about our wildlife in southeast Missouri and how it's affected by floodwaters. In the lowlands of southeast Missouri, along the Mississippi and St. Francis rivers, the majority of primary habitat available for wildlife is located in flood-prone areas. During high water events, deer, turkey, and other wildlife are forced out of their natural habitat. Generally, where our wildlife is forced to is on the protected side of the levee. And if you've ever been to southeast Missouri, you would know that we are very heavy agriculture. So the amount of habitat for wildlife on the protected side of the levee is very slim. It consists of small patches of timber, tree lines, drainage ditches, levee systems, and open ag fields. And a lot of times this provides very little to no cover for high concentrations of wildlife. As the slide says, there's instances where we'll have a small patch of timber that might be 20 acres in size, completely surrounded by agricultural fields that will hold 250 to 300 deer. So they have no place to go, and human interaction has little to do to move them. All right, the issues that we face in southeast Missouri has, well, as the regulation reads now, 3 CSR 10-7.405, wildlife except waterfowl may not be pursued or taken while trapped or surrounded by floodwaters or while fleeing from floodwaters or fire. In talking about fair chase, I'd like to read the definition to y'all from the Boone and Crockett Club on the definition of fair chase. It's defined as the ethical, sportsmanlike, and lawful pursuit and taking of any free-ranging wild, native North American game animal in a manner that does not give the hunter an improper advantage to such animals. Pursuing wildlife during flood conditions in southeast Missouri is not only unethical, it gives the hunter a very unfair advantage over our wildlife there. We actually had a case, and it was in my county, in Pemiscot County, of a couple individuals that harvested deer in a very small block of timber that was holding 250 to 300 deer. And they were charged with it, but the case didn't go through. And the point that I'm making is that there was a discussion with the local judge there. And he said by reading the regulation as is written now, he would have a hard time convicting somebody of violating this regulation, because his thought process is that if there's 2 deer or whatever wildlife it may be that's standing in front of a hunter, how do they know that the deer on the right was fleeing from floodwaters and the deer on the left was living there the entire time? Basically, his interpretation is that this regulation leaves it up to the individual hunter on how they view the law. So really quick, I want to read, there's it's called void for vagueness doctrine. If a person of ordinary intelligence cannot determine what persons are regulated, what conduct is prohibited, or what punishment may be imposed under a particular law, then that law will be deemed unconstitutionally vague. The U.S. Supreme Court has said that no one may be required at peril of life, liberty, or property to speculate as to the meaning of a penal law. Everyone is entitled to know what the government commands or forbids of them. During these flood conditions, MDC employees are inundated with phone calls. Of course, as always, we get stopped at gas stations and the grocery store and the Mexican restaurant and every other place, asking about the legality of hunting wildlife on certain areas. A lot of times we'll have land operators, landowners, want us to come out and verify their property if it's legal to hunt there during flood conditions. We'll see flood conditions change daily. The Mississippi River, I've seen as much as a 2-foot rise in a 24-hour period. The St. Francis River, I've seen as much as a 4-foot rise, maybe even a 5 in a 24-hour period. Those conditions are constantly changing, and verification of the legality of a property is not feasible. A lot of times when those folks call us, they're left with more questions than answers by the time they get off the phone with us, the way that the current regulation is written. Our goal with this regulation, if it is approved, will close portions of Missouri along the Mississippi and St. Francis rivers to hunting during extreme flood conditions. When we started this process 3 years ago now, we sat down as a team and we decided that we wanted this regulation to be clear, concise, and conservative in nature. We understood going into this that we protect and manage the wildlife and resources of the state of Missouri, and that's exactly what the people of the state of Missouri expect of us. We looked at other regulations in states in the lower Mississippi alluvial valley and what they currently have in place, because this is not just a southeast Missouri issue. If you look really quickly at the Mississippi alluvial valley map, we're on the northern end of it, southeast Missouri is. Every state to the east and to the south of us has some type of regulation currently in place to protect their wildlife fleeing from floodwaters. We specifically looked at the state of Mississippi to model our regulation off of, because they seemed like they knew what they were doing. They put a lot of thought into it. We spoke with Mississippi a lot, Arkansas as well, and Tennessee, and Louisiana. As far as similar regulations go, I want to touch on 3 of them. The state of Arkansas has multiple zones along the Mississippi, St. Francis, and Black Rivers. And each zone closes depending on a U.S. Army Corps of Engineer river gauge. That's electronic. Individuals can get on the internet really quickly and be able to see exactly where the river stage is at. And their zones will close, and I'll try to simplify this because all 3 states have this type of regulation. They have 2 different levels on their closures. So they have one level, and we'll use the example of 32 foot, say that it will close a zone at 32 foot. All 3 of these states in the regulations reads that those zones will not reopen until a lower stage, for example, would be like 30 foot. The thought process of these states is that it gives the wildlife time to return to their natural habitat as the waters start to recede and our flood conditions diminish. What I like about the state of Arkansas is they have a real-time GIS portal. It's pretty neat. Anybody can get on it, and if, say, you wanted to hunt Zone A, you could quickly get onto their website and find out whether it's green or red on whether or not you can hunt it. So that was pretty neat with the state of Arkansas. The state of Tennessee experiences the same issues that we have. I work closely with those guys. They're my neighbors in Pemiscot County and New Madrid County as well. Their issues came to a head on the New Year's flood of 2016. Within 6 months of that flood event, the state of Tennessee had this regulation in place, and it was implemented into their wildlife code. They also use U.S. Army Corps of Engineer river gauges as well, and they have one zone that stretches from the south border of Kentucky to the north line of Mississippi. And then finally, the state of Mississippi, they have multiple zones along the Mississippi River. They also use U.S. Army Corps of Engineer river gauges as well. And the thing, I know that I apologize for the map, it's a little blurry, but if you can see, Zone 2 and Zone 4 have subzones. And these subzones, how they work is as the river continues to rise, it continues to close additional land. The reason why I point that out is because we actually modeled one of our zones, Zone 3, off of the state of Mississippi for additional closures. And we'll get to that here in just a minute. The history and research. Our team, when we got together, we tried to look at every aspect possible. We first started out with ring flood charts, and it's pretty interesting. We were able to map in the last 10 years the timing and the duration of every flood event that we have in each particular zone that we had designated. Coupling that with LiDAR data analysis so that we could put into the computer a certain river stage and know exactly how many acres of land is inundated within that zone, to know what available dry habitat is available for our wildlife at a certain stage. We also used data that we collected from ground truthing by vehicle and boat, and we also talked to the general public and received their input as well. Now, for the proposed recommendations, there's actually two proposed recommendations. The first is for the fall deer and turkey hunting season, and the second is for the spring turkey hunting season. These regulations utilize clearly defined zone boundaries that correlate with flooding patterns. They use available river gauges along the Mississippi and St. Francis rivers, which are U.S. Army Corps of Engineer gauges, and they're consistent with what other states already have in place. And they provide the best solution in order to achieve our goal of protecting the wildlife of the state of Missouri and southeast Missouri. If you notice on the fall deer and turkey map, Zone 3, there's 3 subzones, 3A, 3B, and 3C. And it's a pretty interesting zone, and it's very dynamic in the fact that there's multiple factors. The Mississippi River, of course, is the main one. And then we also have the New Madrid and St. John's floodways. Once the Mississippi River rises to a certain level, they actually close gates at the breach in the floodway, which I'm sure you all are aware of, the New Madrid floodway. Once those gates are closed and we receive significant rain and a continued rising river, the amount of land that's inundated with water is unbelievable in this area. So that's the model off of Mississippi that we use. If you look at the spring turkey regulation, that map looks a little different. The reason why we did that is from our experience and our knowledge working in southeast Missouri in the Boot Heel, is that turkeys react differently to flood conditions than what deer and other wildlife do as they push that water line. So for example, if water is up on the mainline levee of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the turkeys will be sitting on the levee. We'll see large groups of turkeys that will congregate on top of the levee. If a vehicle drives down it, the turkeys will flush to the trees on the flooded side of the levee. And once they feel like it's safe, the turkeys will fly back to the top of the levee. Very seldom do we see turkeys travel outside of the levee system in southeast Missouri. So that's why there's a different regulation. In closing, southeast Missouri has limited habitat for wildlife to utilize. The habitat that we do have in southeast Missouri is second to none. I contribute that to our staff, our management staff with forestry, private land services, wildlife, protection, some too. USDA, NRCS, different agencies such as those in implementing wetland reserve easements, CRP, watershed protection programs, things like that. We have amazing habitat in southeast Missouri for wildlife. The unfortunate part is the majority of that habitat lies in the flood-prone areas. The regulation that we're seeking to protect wildlife that during periods of stress and uncertainty. And the take-home point for today is Missouri is not the only state with these issues, but we are the only state as of now that has yet to address the issues. So, I definitely thank you for your time and your consideration in this proposal. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And if I don't have the answer, I guarantee Tim or Tommy will, or Tim or Ross will.
Brian, thank you for your effort, because it's been a multi-year effort and a really important regulation for this part of the state. And I know as landowners down there, I personally appreciate your dedication to that area, because sometimes it gets overlooked a bit. But appreciate this detailed thought process of reaching this regulation that is so important to those people that hunt down there. So thank you, and I'm sorry, commissioners. Would you like to make comments as well?
Brian, thank you. And as you know, I'm very familiar with that area.
Yes, you are.
Living in Sykeston and some of the problems that exist. But I think 3 or 4 years ago, there was a big buck that was killed in,
Pitt, Scott County.
exactly. Would this regulation stop that?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
It would have never happened.
Thank you.
I'm intrigued by the complexity of this as,
We are too.
yeah, as I think about the regulation process and have a sensitivity to the fact that every change that we make in the wildlife code often is connected somehow to something else that we don't really understand at the time, and it's a serious concern that I have. I also am concerned about informing our public about what is legal and what is not, and I think it's an important process that people have to understand it if they're going to support it and be in favor of it. I'm thrilled at the effort that you put into this to address a serious problem, and I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And in closing, I'd like to say we're also in the process of experiencing major flood conditions here in the next 2 weeks. I know everybody here has very busy schedules, but to get into an airplane and to see the amount of water that we will be experiencing in the next 2 weeks would be very beneficial to kind of putting everything together. What I explained today and seeing it on the ground, it's very impressive as far as the amount of water and the
Brian,
lack of habitat.
Could I ask you another question? And that is,
Absolutely.
I'm interested in knowing what you know anecdotally about how this enforcement has worked in other states.
How this
How's the
worked in the other
enforcement
state?
of the regulations that exist in the other states? that you
From
identified?
the wildlife officers that I've spoke with and also wildlife biologists, it has made their job a lot easier. And even though there was some pushback, for perfect example, the state of Mississippi, when they first implemented this, you've seen the map and how many zones they have. And the first year that this was implemented, every zone closed. And they said that they actually put extra staff at their headquarters, wherever that may be, in anticipation of mass phone calls of complaints. And they said that they got one call from a squirrel hunter. And that was it. The thing that definitely the take-home point is that Southeast Missouri, we do not have much wildlife. The wildlife we have, we cherish. We put them on a pedestal, you know, with the exception of a few poachers. But, you know, in my county, we harvest 140 deer combined with all seasons. There's some counties in the Ozarks that do that in the first 10 minutes of firearms season. So a proposal like this, speaking with the public, I have yet to receive a negative comment on it. They understand the importance of our wildlife. My old timers in Southeast Missouri, they remember a time where they used to take pictures of deer tracks to prove to friends that they actually seen a deer track. So to be able to see the amount of wildlife that we have there now is, people are just absolutely amazing. They want to make sure that it stays there, and whatever it takes to protect that wildlife, they're willing to do it.
Got to ask, what is the judge who wasn't sure whether the deer on the right or on the left would be the one responding to protection? What do you think of this?
Of this regulation, I think that he would, you know, and I spoke with him a little bit about it, but this regulation makes it black and white. And at the end of the day, when people call, the majority of the folks don't want to violate the wildlife code. They just want to know if when they go out to hunt this particular area, if they have to be looking over their shoulder or if they can actually enjoy themselves. And that's mainly what it boils down to. And this makes it black and white, and it's easy for people to understand when they can and can't go.
Thank you.
Thank you all again.
Very good.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Appreciate it. And Mike, let's go through this regulation, and then we'll take a break
Okay?
for a brief, before we
Absolutely.
resume
Absolutely,
regulations.
Commissioner. With this change, in addition to changes to 10.7.405 general provisions, as described by Agent Shelton, and in order to protect animals fleeing from floodwaters and give clear guidance to the public, Wildlife Division introduced a proposed change to 10-11.115 closings that would restrict public use except fishing and waterfowl hunting by boat on Girvan and Black Island conservation areas in southeast Missouri during periods of high water on the Mississippi River. Madam Chair, I request commission approval of 10-7.405 general provisions and 10-11.115 closings as described.
Do we have a motion to approve?
I would make a motion, but I would like some clarification.
Certainly.
Madam Chair, if you would like for me to make the motion and then discuss it, be happy to do that.
Absolutely.
Second.
Okay?
For
We're
discussion.
not talking, and maybe Brian can clarify this, we're not talking about someone coming through on a boat, getting out on the land with a duck blind and duck hunting, are we?
No, not on those,
I
not on those.
read this, that it excludes duck hunting.
And fishing.
Right.
Does not exclude duck hunting. It allows duck hunting by boat. The walk-in is what it would exclude. But if you can access it by boat, you can do it.
Okay, what kind of feedback have you had from duck hunters relative to being able to walk in to the area in lieu of having to boat in? Because some of those places they walk into, I'm sorry,
Some of those areas you could walk.
yes.
You want me to? Some of those areas you can walk into. The reason why the part of by boat is put in there is more or less for public safety. A lot of our areas experience rapid changes in flood conditions, of course, as you know. We have areas that county roads will be closed off, access roads to on our conservation areas will be quickly inundated with water, running water, with a lot of current. And the reason why that's in there is just to prevent folks from getting caught into a situation with high water to where we have incidences on our conservation areas. That's mainly why it's in there.
I'm thinking about the individual that has a field, a blind in a field, and they walk in or they go in with an ATV or whatever, and now that's all flooded. And they can't necessarily get there by boat. Are they stopped from being able to go into that by either walking or the same way with an ATV?
As far as, now this is, you're talking about private property, correct?
Yes, sir.
This is only for our conservation area. The chapter 11,
Correct.
yeah, chapter 11, the two for Gervin Conservation Area and also Black Island Conservation Area, these are just, the chapter 11 regulations are just for those two conservation areas.
Thank you.
So that has, the chapter 7, the one that I gave the presentation on, there's that's not in that regulation.
There's no private land involved.
No, as far as, you can, say your private duck field is flooded, but you can drive a UTV in 2 foot of water to get there, that's perfectly fine, that's not a problem. This is for a safety issue for our conservation areas.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Absolutely. So we have our discussion. We had a second. Are we in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Regulation passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will take a short break.
Thank you.
And reconvene in about 15 minutes. Thank you very much. Mike? let's
To
start
continue with the
again.
regulations report, Madam Chair. Commissioners, recall the Wildlife Division has been engaged in a significant multi-year effort to review Chapter 11 of the Wildlife Code, which deals with regulations specific to conservation areas. In July, you voted to move forward with recommendations for 17 code changes that clarified activities allowed on conservation areas and expanded opportunities for our citizens by eliminating unnecessary and outdated verbiage. Those changes have gone through the rulemaking process and will be effective on March 1st of this year. Wildlife Division and members of the Public Use Working Group continue to engage in this review and have identified additional changes that will serve our area users by clearly defining permitted and restricted activities and clarifying methods by which citizens will be notified where hunting and fishing are restricted on department areas. Madam Chair, I request Commission approval of proposed amendments to 10-11.110 general provisions, 11.140 camping, 11.180 hunting general provisions seasons, and 11.200 fishing general provisions and seasons as described.
Do we have a motion to?
So moved.
and a
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank
Right,
you,
the
Mike.
fin-
Next one.
The final set of recommendations for proposed wildlife code changes were brought forward by Resource Science Division. Given recent surveys that indicate declines in already threatened populations of cold water and spring river crayfish, Resource Science recommends an amendment to 10-4.111 endangered species to add those two species of crayfish to Missouri's endangered species list, and an amendment that would update the scientific name of marbled crayfish in 10.4.117 prohibited species based on changes to classifications published in the scientific journal Zootaxa in 2017. Madam Chair, I request Commission approval of 10-4111 endangered species and 10-41.117 prohibited species as described.
We have a
So
motion.
moved.
And a second.
Second,
Discussion?
just a little bit. It's a delight to me and a mystery always that scientific names change more than common names.
It's quite the interesting phenomenon.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next one.
Commissioners, the department continues to implement measures to prevent the spread and minimize prevalence of chronic wasting disease on the landscape. Movement and disposal of potentially infected cervid carcasses poses a risk of transporting CWD to new regions and hinders management efforts. To address those concerns and at the same time minimize impacts to small businesses, Resource Science is proposing two rule changes that would establish a requirement for commercial processors and taxidermists to dispose of carcasses in a properly permitted sanitary landfill or transfer station and maintain disposal records. Resource Science Supervisor Dr. Charles Anderson will provide a more detailed overview of these proposals. Dr. Anderson has a master's degree in forestry from Stephen F. Austin University and a PhD in zoology from Southern Illinois, focusing on white-tailed deer biology and management for both of his graduate degrees. Dr. Anderson joined the department in 2011 as a Forest Systems Field Station Supervisor in West Plains. In 2013, he was promoted to Resource Science Supervisor over the Heritage Program. He currently serves as a Resource Science Supervisor over the Division's Terrestrial Unit based out of the Columbia Regional Office and Conservation Research Center. In that role, he coordinates development of wildlife code recommendations. Today, Dr. Anderson will provide information and recommendations regarding CWD risks related to transportation and disposal of cervid carcasses. Dr. Anderson, the podium is yours.
Good morning, Commissioners, Director Polly, Ms. Maples. Just like Jason, I'm extremely privileged to be in front of you today, not because carcass disposal and transportation is just darn interesting. It's also because it's important towards mitigation of CWD risk in our state. So I'd like to really quick address or recognize a couple people, Jasmine Batten and Keith Cordell, Kevin Wiskirkin, and Aaron Hildreth on all the CWD work that they do throughout the year and that information that I get from them, I wouldn't be able to give this presentation today without that. So, kind of overview of my presentation is sources of CWD risk for transporting and disposal of cervid carcasses, what has been addressed, what remains to be addressed, public and taxidermist and processor engagement that we've done, and potential regulations. So it's unlikely that this distribution of CWD in Missouri is attributed to natural dispersal alone. It is likely that human facilitated transmission plays a role in Missouri's CWD distribution. Now that we've had a few years of mandatory sampling under our belt and have resolved the captive cervid lawsuit, we are now in a position to step back and take a look at our current CWD regulations and assess how and if they are addressing risks related to disease, introduction, and spread. Now, this is my personal assessment of risk when it comes to movement of live and dead deer and of the cervid program, and also disposal of dead deer. Now, this isn't just in CWD management alone, not just in our state, but there is a high risk of CWD with movement of live and dead deer and disposal of dead deer. So with movement of live deer, we have addressed several things with that, with the captive cervid lawsuit, and we've had the importation ban, but also within our CWD management zone, with rescinding APR. APR, antler point restriction, does help us take away protections a little bit on those higher risk age class bucks that have the higher risk of spreading CWD. Now, sources of contamination are important as well. Specifically here is a publication on carcasses as a source of infection in the environment. We do have a carcass importation ban in the state. Our current regulation allows for meat and cut, that is cut and wrapped or boned out quarters, antlers, finished taxidermy products. However, we do have a allowance for whole carcasses to come into the state if they use our 24-hour hotline and to bring their meat to a processor or their heads to a taxidermist. Now, this is considered a loophole in the sense that if you come into the state, you go to your home. If you haven't been checked already, you have the opportunity to process as your own meat without even contacting the hotline. And maybe we can show this a little bit here with when the first came into being our carcass importation ban. There was a reportings of 1,300 carcasses, or individuals who reported carcasses coming into the state back in 2010. And then come all the way down to 2017, we have 642 now. So we suspect this is a result of report decline and not necessarily decline of out-of-state hunters. But it also suggests that the magnitude of affected hunters by this ban in our state is relatively low. If the first year is the best indication of the number of hunters affected, that would be about 0.3% of our 500,000 hunters in this state. So if we look at the carcasses that do come in from out of state, for those states that have greater than 50 carcasses, Arkansas leads the pack with 37% of the carcasses coming into this state. If you recall that they have a recent high prevalence rate in a certain area in Arkansas. So again, Arkansas leads the pack with that. So when we're talking about movement of dead deer, we have slightly addressed the movement of, or have carcass importation that still needs some modification and really looking at. But also we haven't addressed carcass movement within the Missouri. So in that, we would be considering a regulation prohibiting the movement of whole carcasses out of high-risk areas. Now, we currently have a number of options we are considering for what high risk entails. Though these options range from every county in the management zone to only positive counties with those within 5 miles of a positive detection. There are pros and cons associated with each of these options, and we are working with Protection Division and administration to identify the best approach. Now, with this carcass movement within the state, that would be, again, similar to that importation ban. Meat that's boned out would be okay, skulls and antlers with brain tissue removed, taxidermy products. But also, too, we don't want to hinder our hunters and our small businesses in the sense of hunters are successful, they're happy, they've gotten a deer. Now they're limited to going back to necessarily wherever they came from in this thing, so we need to have perhaps an exception to allow them to come out of those areas with whole carcasses, and then also not to harm small businesses in the same sense. So we're considering an exception for whole carcasses brought directly to meat processors. And with this, it would be working with the protection. We can, with these tweaks, and along with the importation ban of out-of-state, we can make these enforceable. Now, this is important for disposal. As we get into this here, in carcass movement, disposal will be key, because in order for these exceptions to be allowed, we really need to have disposal and address disposal in order to do that. So I apologize for this slide. Please ignore the red outlined areas. But if I want to show you here is on 45% when we survey our hunters and how they dispose of their carcasses, 45% do dispose them on the property they hunt. We have 33% that take the deer to their processor, and then we have 8% that bring them to a landfill. So in roughly about 85%, if you had a carcass, if we had an exception, allow whole carcasses out of the state, about 85% of hunters wouldn't be affected. So again, when we're addressing transportation and allowing transportation of carcasses into the state and within the state, we really have to discuss disposal first, that end game, where the contamination could occur. So we need to address that. And one, with the hunters, they're doing a good job, I think, with 8% going in the landfill and 45% on the property that they hunt. But we still have concerns, obviously, with these other avenues of sources on different properties where they go, or a different property within the county, out of the county, or other. But when we get to this, you'll notice that commercial carcass disposal is another issue with that, and that's with this right here. We have 33% of our surveyed hunters bring them to a processor. So when we, in 2017, we had an initiative from conservation agents to go out and approach our processors and taxidermists and see where they're putting their, disposing of the carcasses. While 69% were putting them in a trash or landfill, 31% still were not putting them in a landfill, and that would included a wide variety of means, from composting, rendering, to just anywhere and everywhere, the back 40 landfill pit, those type of things. So when it comes to allowing for transportation of whole carcasses and allowing exceptions, we really have to address the disposal first. And so we'd be considering a regulation requiring licensed meat processors and taxidermists to dispose of cervic carcasses waste in a permitted landfill or transfer station. Now, online, we did provide some public outreach, and we went and provided this year an online and recorded presentation and 6 open houses. And part of that was to update Missourians on CWD, what it is, what we were doing about it, what they can do to help, but also to gather input on carcass movement and carcass importation. Now, with that feedback, I want to point out that this is only from our open houses and online comments that we received, so it's not a random survey, but of those that we did receive those comments, when we asked them, do you feel a proposed carcass movement restriction within Missouri is reasonable? And do you feel the proposed removal of carcass importation exception is reasonable? Vast majority of those comments did find that a reasonable move forward. We also had direct contact with Missouri Taxidermists Association and the Missouri Association of Meat Processors. And in that, when we contacted them about the regulations and transportation rules that we were looking at potentially, they were excited to see the exceptions of allowing those whole carcasses. Again, because we don't want to harm or hinder the hunters. They're excited. They just had a quality hunt, and then they want to bring them to a taxidermist, want to bring them to a meat processor, and then we do not want to hinder small businesses. So they were excited to see those type of exceptions. Again, it's about that end game, though. It's that carcass disposal that we've got to look at first. So when we look at a regulation, there's no really the perfect regulation. There's the best regulation. And when we look at this, especially for this intensive purposes of CWD management, it's really a balance between disease management, small businesses, hunters' buy-in and participation, and enforceability. So regulations to consider in the future, carcass movement within Missouri, carcass importation. We want to provide those exceptions that allow for hunters to transport to taxidermists and meat processors, but for us to do that, we really need disposal needs to be addressed. So regulations to consider right now is for commercial deer processing, require all cervic carcasses that aren't, the parts that aren't returned to the patrons to be put into a landfill or transfer station, also to retain proof of disposal for at least a certain period of time. When looking at the fiscal note of this rule, in 2019, there's 237 permitted commercial deer harvests, commercial deer processors. And going back to our 2017 assessment, we estimate about 74 of those would be impacted by this rule. And we also estimated the cost related to a dumpster delivery, removal, and weekly change out. And then for our taxidermy tanning permit, we required, again, licensed taxidermists and tanners shall dispose of all cervic carcass parts that aren't returned to their patrons to a landfill or transfer station, and to retain proof of disposal for at least a certain amount of time. Again, with the fiscal note, 2019 for this rule, there are 697 permitted taxidermists. And we, again, with our 2017 assessment, about 31% or 216 taxidermists could be affected by this rule. And we also, with a similar thing, we would estimate dumpster costs and annual change or weekly changeouts. So I would like to leave you with a final thought, our hunting public, and what they think about CWD. It may sometimes be discouraging if you only look at social media or listen to some of the loud critics and CWD deniers, but I want to share that we recently asked our hunters if they thought CWD was a threat to our deer population. 74% of our hunters agreed this is good news, and it means that if we make reasonable regulation changes, we should have support of our hunters. I also want to point out that, as note, that 20% of our hunters still had no opinion about it. Lastly, the majority of Missouri hunters realize that CWD is a threat to the health and of the statewide deer population. We are now in a position to make reasonable regulation changes to reduce an unmet risk to disease introduction and spread. We cannot manage this disease or our state's deer population without hunter buy-in and participation. We don't want to hinder small businesses, and CWD remains relatively rare in our state, and we want to keep it that way. Thank you. I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Charles. Commissioners, questions of Charles?
Chuck, it appears to me that a great deal of the consequences of the regulation impact not individual hunters, but processors and taxidermists, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Bedell?
Couple of questions. You mentioned in one part, I think, about the record keeping.
Yes.
It could be as long as 3 years. Why so long if they're testing and can get results back?
Well, that was because of no change to the particular rule. They already had a record-keeping requirements, and we didn't change that. We just added that particular disposal receipt or disposal to the already requirement or amount of time that was already there.
The total fiscal though, you had that broken down? Like one part $356, one part $75 a
Yes.
week or whatever. Do you have a total dollar amount
Yes.
anticipated?
Yes, for processors, it should be about 114,000 aggregate annual for those impacted, and then roughly 330,000 for taxidermist annual aggregate for those who are impacted by that amount, or by this rule.
What about, if I might, Madam Chair,
Continue.
the number of taxidermists that are not participating in the disposal process right now? Have you communicated directly with any of those? you had the percentage of those that are not disposing through that process, approval by the DNR or whatever.
We've been in contact with the Taxidermist Association as a whole and discussing with their president.
Okay, so you have not directly contacted any of the non-participating taxidermists?
Not individually, no.
Okay, thank you.
Important point. Thank you, Charles. Further questions? All right, thank you, Charles.
I'm back for the last time, I promise.
Welcome back, Mike.
Madam Chair, would you like for me to move forward on these recommendations, or how would you prefer to proceed?
Well, there has been much discussion on this topic, these two regulations, and at this motion, or at this moment, I would entertain a motion to table these two.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mike?
Thank you. Moving on. Working with members of the Missouri Trappers Association, Resource Science Division drafted 2 proposed amendments that will allow trappers to be more efficient. The proposed amendments to 10-8.510, use of traps, would include drowning sets on the list of trapping methods subject to the 48-hour trap check, and clarify that snares in water must be at least half submerged. A proposed change to 20.805 definitions adds a definition of drowning sets to the code. Madam Chair, I request Commission approval of these action items as described.
Have a motion? And a second?
I'll second it, but I would like to have some discussion.
Absolutely.
Why?
Because we were approached by the group, and they are currently under a 24-hour check, and drowning sets do not have the same potential for loss of fur or animals to be in those traps for long periods of time that could be thought of as inhumane. And so they asked for the additional time to be able to work those sets instead of having to visit them every day, to visit them every other day, as we allow some other sets. And so the committee felt that that was a reasonable request.
Have we talked to trappers about telling them that they have to have a snare that must be at least half submerged?
That is actually already the case. This clarifies it in the rule.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Murphy, comments? All right, thank you. Do we have a motion to approve this regulation?
Yes.
And a second?
Second.
And we've had our discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Next.
The final recommendation for commission consideration is a change to 10-11.186 waterfowl hunting that would clarify waterfowl hunt procedures by establishing one consistent draw system within the code. Madam Chair, I request commission approval for this action item as described.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Just a few more comments, Madam Chair, if you will indulge me.
Please, Mike, proceed.
Commissioners, Mr. Clint Helm will meet with the Regulations Committee on March 14th to discuss regulations changes that would allow the use of thermal optics and artificial lights to take predators at night. Over the last few months, the department has received an increased number of requests from citizens and landowners who would like to use this type of equipment to take feral hogs and predators, including coyotes, at night. While there are numerous valid concerns regarding legalization of these methods in terms of safety, poaching issues, identification of target, and fair chase, the department recognizes the need to be mindful of landowners who wish to use this technology to address issues they're experiencing on their property. To that end, I have asked Protection Division Chief Randy Dolman to assemble a team led by Protection Field Chief Dean Harry to thoroughly review the Wildlife Code and appropriate statutes to identify a reasonable solution. Any recommendations for rule changes will be brought forward for Regulation Committee consideration during its mid-year review of the Wildlife Code. Madam Chair, with your permission, I'd like to provide a brief update to the Commission regarding recent amendments to the Department's violation code and point systems. Specific changes include an increase in points for various violations, including placement of consumable products within CWD management zone, fraudulent use of resident hunting and fishing permits by residents, and illegal take of paddlefish. A copy of the memo which outlines all of these changes was signed by the director and myself and is provided in your binder. Commissioners, since my last Regulations Committee report, citizens have provided an input on a variety of topics. A summary of these comments is included in my formal report beginning on page 3. Upcoming meetings of the Regulation Committee are scheduled for March 14th, April 4th, June 5th, July 18th, which is our mid-year code review, September 12th, November 19th, 2019. Madam Chair, unless you or the members of the commission have questions, this concludes my Regulations Committee report.
Commissioners, questions, comments?
A lot of work on the part of your committee. We thank you very much.
The staff have done yeoman's efforts on this round. So, appreciate the commission's indulgence and time. Thank you.
I just make the observation, the discussion about and actions about carcass disposal is not complete yet.
Duly noted, Commissioner.
And thank you, Mike, for your committee's work. You clearly have been very busy, and we appreciate the detail and time and effort that it goes into it. And as Commissioner Murphy stated, we will be reviewing this other 2 items that we tabled. So thank you very much.
Our staff
Appreciate it.
do a great job, and some of these are multi-year efforts, as the flood stuff was an example of, and it's really impressive to see them work together and come to a viable conclusion at the end of the work. Thank you,
Awesome
Commissioners.
work. Thank you.
Well, I think, Madam Chair, if I could, that for the record, we do not take these lightly.
That's
We
right.
have studied them, and the public needs to know that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew?
Speaking of studying carefully.
Our fiscal year in review here, mid-year.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Director Pauly, Ms. Maples. I'll be presenting item 7 on your agenda. I will update you on the December 2018 financial summary for fiscal year 2019, as at the same time as providing the mid-year review. The December 2018 financial summary provides results from the first half of the fiscal year and is the basis for the trend assumptions in the mid-year review. If you could turn your attention to the fiscal year 2019 mid-year review in your advanced materials. The purpose of this review is to report the revenue and expenditure trends for the first half of the fiscal year and explain mid-year adjustments to the original estimates. I'll begin first with the revenue trends. On page 2 of your report, you will note that total revenues for fiscal year 2019 are generally categorized into 4 main sources: 61% budgeted from the conservation sales tax, 17% from permit sales, 16% from federal reimbursements, and 6% from other revenue sources. As of December 2018, total fiscal year-to-date revenues were 4.1% higher than fiscal year 2018 and 0.6% above expectations. Due to the trends matching closely to expectations, no adjustment is proposed to total revenues to achieve a growth rate of 3% above fiscal year 18. The first revenue category is conservation sales tax. For the first half of fiscal year 2019, conservation sales tax revenues were 3.9% above the first half of, in comparison with fiscal year 2018, and 0.3% of expectations. Please note that the FY 2019 estimates are projected prior to the end of fiscal year 2018. Budget requests will vary in percentage growth rates when compared to actual 2018 revenue. Therefore, we hold our budget estimates to dollars budgeted as opposed to the percentage change. The FY 2019 budget originally assumed a 2% growth rate. Based on current sales tax revenues trend, no adjustment is proposed in the sales tax revenue to maintain a growth rate of 2.5% above fiscal year 18. As a side note, according to the Office of Administration, as of today, which would have been yesterday's sales tax receipts, sales tax revenue collections were 3.56% above fiscal year 18. Next revenue category is permit sales. For the first half of 2019, permit sales were 0.9% below 2018 and in line with expectations. Due to the consistent trend in permit sales thus far, no adjustment is proposed to permit sales revenues to maintain a growth rate of 1.5% above fiscal year 18.
How much of our annual permit sales happens in the month of March? They expire at the end of February, right? And so we start,
The permit year starts in March, correct? So, I'm sorry,
how much of the total revenue from permit sales for the year can we expect in the month of March?
I don't know that I have that readily at hand,
Just
but I can certainly
curious.
provide
Not-
that to you.
Not a deal breaker, I just, I'm curious.
I'd be happy to provide that.
Thank you.
The next revenue category is federal reimbursements. For fiscal year 2019 through December 2018, federal reimbursements were 9.6% above the level earned in fiscal year 18 and 0.7% below expectations. Federal funds represent the reimbursement Missouri earns from federal grants for conservation projects and activities. Due to the consistent trend in federal reimbursements for 2019, no adjustment is proposed to maintain a growth rate of 8.5% above fiscal year 18. Final revenue category represents the remaining other funds. Other sources of revenue include sales, rentals, interest, contractual services, donations, insurance reimbursements, settlements, and refunds. For the first 6 months of 2019, other revenues were 9.5% higher than fiscal year 18 and 19.1% above expectations. No adjustment is proposed for other revenues at this time.
Does that include timber sales?
It does include timber sales. If there aren't additional questions on revenues, I'll turn to expenditures.
Please continue.
On page 70 of your report, you will note that total expenditures for fiscal year 19 can be categorized into 4 main areas. 51% budgeted for personal services, 39% for expense and equipment, 9% from construction, and 1% from land conservation and partnerships. As of December of 2018, total fiscal year-to-date expenditures were 6.2% lower than the same period in fiscal year 2018 and 13% below expectations. Department conducted a mid-year review of expenditures to determine the correct level of spending and redirect funds to strategic goals. From this review for 2019, a 3.2% reduction is proposed to total to total expenditures from original estimates, resulting in a net increase of 13.4% from fiscal year 18. These adjustments will be discussed in more detail in the appropriate expenditure category. First expenditure category is personal services. Personal service expenditures include salaried positions, hourly staff, and accompanying benefits. For the first half of 2019, personal service expenditures were 2.6% above fiscal year 18 and 3.2% below original expectations. Based on the mid-year review, a small increase is proposed to hourly labor that did not equate to a percentage change in personal service expenditures for a net growth rate of 6.3% from fiscal year 18. The next expenditure category is expense and equipment. Together, expense and equipment are budgeted at 39% of total expenditures. For the first half of 2019, expense and equipment expenditures together were 11.9% below fiscal year 2018 and 5% below expectations. Individually, expenses were 14.2% below fiscal year 18 and 6.9% below original expectations. Expenditures for equipment were 3.7% above fiscal year 18 and 6.9% above original expectations. Based on the mid-year review, a slight decrease is proposed that does not equate to a percentage change in overall expense and equipment expenditures for a net growth rate of 0.8%. Individually, the mid-year review resulted in a proposed decrease to expenses of 1.6% and a corresponding dollar increase to equipment, resulting in an increase of 11.4%. The final expenditure category is for capital improvements. Capital improvements includes construction and land conservation and partnerships. For the first half of 2019, capital expenditures are 43.5% below 2018 levels and 64.1% below original expectations. Based on the trends of capital improvements during the mid-year review, a 15.1% decrease is proposed for capital improvements budget from the original estimate. The rate of reduction equates to a 38.6% adjustment from the original estimate of an 155.9% increase from fiscal year 18. That will move now to 117% over 18. Individually, the mid-year review resulted in a proposed decrease to construction of 20.6% from the original estimate. The proposed decrease reduces the original construction budget from a budgeted increase of 110% over 18 to a 67.4% increase over 18, for a net decline of 43.4%. The reasons for the construction reductions will be addressed in more detail in the Design and Development Division Chief's presentation immediately following mine. No adjustment is proposed in the Land Conservation and Partnership budget. Summary of the mid-year adjustments has been provided on page 11 of the report in your materials. And this concludes my remarks on the mid-year 2019 review.
Commissioners, questions?
Very helpful. Thank you.
Commissioner Bedell?
No questions.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Jacob, welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair,
Morning.
Director Pauly. I have the next 3 agenda items. The first one is a construction budget mid-year review summary. There's 3 components of that report that are in your advanced materials that I'll share with you. Then answer any questions you may have before we move to the next 2 agenda items, which are action items for the commission. So the mid-year review reveals that construction expenditures for fiscal year 2019 are below target to meet the projected expenditure of $28,896,000. There are 3 primary factors influencing the lower than planned construction expenditures. The first is a carryover effect from the failure of House Bill 19 for fiscal year 2018. Projects planned for construction starting in the second half of fiscal year 2018 were put on hold until the fiscal year 2019 appropriation bills and MDC expenditure plan were approved. This delay limited construction activity until well into the fall, after project advertisements, bidding, and contract execution processes were completed. The second factor is the cold and wet weather experienced over much of the state this fall and winter. Unfavorable site conditions due to the weather have limited the ability of contractors to make meaningful progress on several of the larger construction projects that are currently under contract. The final factor is the delayed advertisement of the Fountain Grove Pump Station project due to a longer than expected process to secure permit clearances. At mid-year, there are several construction projects under contract and poised to start work in earnest as soon as the weather breaks and water levels subside. Construction expenditures are expected to be significantly higher in the second half of the fiscal year, but will not be enough to meet the projected expenditures of $28,896,000. In your advanced materials, there is a dashboard for the infrastructure asset management inventory effort. And I'm happy to report that that effort is going extremely well. The strike teams are doing stupendous work, And you'll see on the dashboard that there's over 18,609 individual assets in the system. That replacement cost for those assets is over $8.4 million. The strike teams have completed the inventory and condition assessments on 149 conservation areas. Consultants have completed inventory assessments and condition assessments on 7 conservation areas for a total of 156 of the 1,194 conservation areas. So great progress. In fact, 3 strike teams will be completely done with their work this spring, way ahead of schedule. So they're doing great work. And the consultants, if you'll recall from previous materials, they have the larger, more infrastructure dense areas. So we, as anticipated, their progress is lagging behind the strike teams. The third part of the report is the status, the regular status report in your materials. In the maintenance and repair category, line 2 at 4 Rivers, the water control gate replacement project is under contract now. It is just starting. The contractor is working through the submittal process, and then there's a long lead time for those gates. So we expect work to start in earnest this spring. On line 4, the stone veneer replacement at Central Regional Office, the design is complete. And since the issuance of this report, we have started advertisement for that project. And on line 5, the Conservation Discovery Center and the Gorman Conservation Discovery Center, the roof replacement project, that design is complete and will be advertised this Sunday. Under the rehabilitations category on line 11 at Lake City Range, the baffle panel improvements project has been signed and the notice to proceed is issued for March 1st. So work will start this spring there. On the second page of your report, under the capital improvements category, I'm happy to report that the Fountain Grove Wetland Renovation Phase 2 project on line 5, we did sign that contract this week. So contractor has already started sending us submittals for approval, and they will start work more than likely late March. On line 7, Duck Creek Conservation Area, the wetland renovation project there, it's underwater. And it's been underwater for a while, and it's probably going to be underwater until April, if the rains stop. On line 8 at Roaring River Fish Hatchery, that project also is struggling with the wet weather we've had this winter. So contractor is doing their best, but they haven't made a lot of progress since after Christmas because of historically high spring levels, water levels at that location. And on line 10 at Headwaters Access, the boat ramp renovation, it is underwater as well. And with the Mississippi River rising, it'll probably be some time before that project is able to really get back on track. So that concludes my remarks for the mid-year status report for the construction projects. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about any of the projects.
Commissioners, questions, comments?
Want to take a stab at the trout opener? We're going to have high water in the parks?
I think the water conditions will be favorable for trout fishing.
Thank you, excellent report.
Commissioner Bedell?
I would only have one comment. That's in your write-up on the first page, where you say that the expenditures are projected to be a lot higher in the second half
Yes, sir.
of the year, but not enough to meet the projected expenditure. I think what you ought to be saying is that will not be enough to complete the projects that we have underway, if you would. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
The next is an action item.
I have a recommendation for authorization to enter into a contract with BRS Construction LLC of Edina, Missouri for construction of the Shanks Conservation Area Water Control Structures Replacement Project located in Pike County at a total cost of $2,090,200. It is further requested that a contingency fund of $105,000 be authorized for unforeseen conditions or other changes necessary to complete the project. Total authorization requested is $2,195,200.
Madam Chair, in light
Yes,
of
sir.
the fact that we have discussed this, I
We
would
have.
move that we approve this.
Second.
And we've had discussion, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. Next one.
Next item is a recommendation for authorization to enter a contract with Cat Excavation Incorporated of Bate City, Missouri for construction of the Perry Memorial Conservation Area Range relocation located in Johnson County at a total cost of $532,610. It is further requested that a contingency fund of $26,000 be authorized for unforeseen conditions or other changes necessary to complete the project. Total authorization requested is $558,610.
So moved.
Motion, second.
Second.
We have had our discussion, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
luck.
you, sir.
Good luck.
Good luck on the high water.
Good luck with Carney.
Yeah, that line makes it appear that we're just gonna spend.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning,
Commissioners,
Doug.
Director Polly. I have the next agenda item, number 11. And I will be providing a brief mid-year IT update for you today. And I'd like to start by sharing about some of the key projects that we've completed during the first half of this fiscal year. The first project is the Infrastructure Asset Management System, which you heard Jacob just speak of a few minutes ago. We are very excited that it is now operational, and as he reported, staff are very busy using that system, inclusive of what you see here. The screenshots are of the mobile data collection module that is within the system. We've also completed several IT infrastructure upgrades at the new Shoal Creek Conservation and Education Center down in Joplin. And as an example of the work completed, these two photos here represent the two wiring cabinets that were in place before the upgrades. And this photo shows the after. You can see behind the original photo, we had two cabinets, and it was kind of a bit messy there. And then we've straightened that out quite a bit, and of course made it much easier to maintain and support long term. We've also installed the typical audiovisual cart that you see here in this photo for use throughout the facility. Prior to last fall's deer season, we worked very closely with staff from Resource Science Division to implement improvements to the chronic wasting disease, or CWD, sample management application. The improvements significantly reduced the time required to enter and process over 20,000 samples that came through last fall. These screenshots just represent a few of the enhancements that were completed, including improvements to the search feature, to the batch submission feature, to the sample result upload feature, and to various reports. I spoke briefly with Jasmine Batten, the department's wildlife disease coordinator, about these enhancements, and she and her staff were, and I quote, thrilled with the improvements. So you can't ask for much better than that. In early December, we rolled out the department's newest mobile application called Mo Outdoors. This app makes it easy for the public to search for and find conservation areas and associated features and activities. The screenshots here represent the main landing page, the search page, the features page, and a map of the selected conservation area. With Mo Outdoors, we've also incorporated a product called AppC within the application. This allows us to quickly understand various usage statistics. For example, in this graph shown here, we can quickly see the download history. And in that graph, you of course see 3 peaks. Those peaks are associated with the initial news release in early December, with the Facebook Live event in early January, and the third peak is the recent article in the February Conservationist. This photo in the lower left helps us to better understand what screens of the application are being used the most or the least, so that we can tailor that for our citizens. And this photo in the lower right shows us the distribution of who is actually using the app, who's downloaded it. Although it's a bit difficult to see, Missourians represent about 65% of the users for the app. And we have downloads for all of the other states across the nation except for 5. There's still a few outliers. And I was talking with Richie a while ago, and we have, I think, about 8 or 10 foreign countries that also have download modes. So quite a far-reaching application. We look very much forward to continue to learn about this new AppSee tool and to help us to use it to serve our citizens much better. We also have several projects currently in progress, including a new capital improvement tracking application, a new fish kill database, and a new learning management system, all of which are currently progressing well. Moving on to briefly talk about our IT maintenance and operations areas. These highlights represent just a small portion of what we do to keep the IT lights on for the department. For example, you see here in the first half of the year, we responded to nearly 7,700 help desk calls. We processed 250 IT purchase requests, provided maintenance and support of numerous applications and devices, and replaced over 200 pieces of IT equipment that had reached their end of useful life. That concludes my prepared comments on the IT mid-year update, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions or comments.
Thank you, Doug. Commissioners,
No
questions?
questions.
Amazing, Doug. Thank you.
Appreciate all your effort on all these wide-ranging initiatives. Yeah, you guys wear a lot of different hats, and we appreciate the work you do.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have a great set of staff and a lot of assistance and help from the division staff that provide expertise as well. So
Thank you for the teamwork.
Yes.
Jennifer?
Morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Director Polly, Ms. Maples. I have the next two action items. The first action item would give the department an opportunity to add some acreage to our Brickyard Hill Conservation Area. Our Brickyard Hill Conservation Area is unique in that it contains high quality and this particular tract, some restorable Les Hill Prairie, which only occurs, it is extremely rare and only occurs in Atchison and Holt counties. Our good partners at Missouri Prairie Foundation are excited about this opportunity as well, and as you know, did contribute a letter of support for the Commission's consideration of the acquisition. So with that, I would request your approval to purchase approximately 287 acres in Atchison County as an addition to Brickyard Hill Conservation Area.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion we've had, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome. Action item 13 would approve disposal of a mostly forested tract that was purchased by the department in 1991 with the intention of instructing a parking lot and a concrete fishing access to the South Faby River. I want to make sure I say it right, in Marion County. However, this is a highly unstable site. We weren't ever able really to deliver on those intentions with this particular tract. As it stands right now, nearly 30 acres of this 40-acre tract are inaccessible to the public. And so with that, we would request your approval to sell the 40-acre Sunrise Access in Marion County.
Second.
And I would say to yield to Commissioner Murphy, who has personally fished this area.
Yep, many times.
Appreciate staff's attention to the site and trying to improve access. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Welcome, Tom.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Director Pauly, and Rhonda. I have, your next item is item 14, the quarterly report of personnel changes. And this is an information-only item. It's a summary of personnel actions approved by Director Pauly during the second quarter of FY19, including promotions, new hires, and lateral transfers. There are no new positions or added positions on this list. Just as a reminder, these are refills of existing positions within the department. So we have not expanded our FTE count. We have merely replaced the great talent we have with new talent that's going to be just as great. So just a report, an update for you, and be happy to answer any questions you may have.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next item.
Next item, and it's my pleasure to provide you with an update on the and an overview of the deliverables of the department's performance management team and progress made by the team to date. I'll then provide the commission with a brief overview of the compensation plan recommendations we're developing for the commission's consideration at your April meeting as part of the FY20 expenditure plan. The department's strategic plan includes objectives to recruit, develop, and retain a diverse and highly skilled workforce, and support a positive work environment where all people are valued and respected. Our total rewards and performance management efforts are critical to the success of these strategic outcomes. After the commission approved implementation of the department-wide job study in July of 2018, the department formed a performance management team to develop the next steps of our performance and compensation plan journey. The performance management team includes staff from every region and every division in the department to ensure we have a diverse perspective and knowledge base necessary for development of department critical efforts for our most important asset, our workforce. I would like to thank each of the members on the team for their continued efforts. They've had big hills to climb, and we still have a few left, but they have been a tremendous help in this, including communication and updates to staff in their regions and divisions necessary to ensure transparency as we develop our recommendations for the Director's Office and Commission. The team has 4 key deliverables that are listed here on the screen. The first is redesign of the performance appraisal process to support a compensation plan structure. Performance appraisals and the days of just simple forms are gone. We need a much more interactive process and yet lean that process as much as possible. The team is exploring avenues such as more regular interactions between supervisors and the folks that they supervise. And we're also expanding this to be a much more interactive conversation. This isn't just the end of the year assessment of 20, 30 years ago. This is much more of an interactive experience that will tie into regular feedback between the supervisor and the employees that he or she supervises. We're also revamping the individual development plan to include an employee's values, preferences, priorities, strengths, and weaknesses. Again, feedback that we have received from employees throughout the Organizational Health Index and also in our many meetings out at the regions is that they want an opportunity to enhance their skills and increase their chances for success, not only in their current position, but they appreciate the investment that we make in their training and their development for their next stages of their career. So we're improving that process, and that is part of that individual development plan. We're also reviewing non-monetary rewards and providing recommendations for revisions or additions to the department's programs. From the recognition at commission meetings of the outstanding work of our employees to recognition when we're doing regional meetings or amongst work groups, we can't do enough of recognizing the great things that our folks do, and it's appreciated. So we're exploring avenues there again to enhance those efforts. All of this ties into, and you'll see that all those deliverables are for FY20. The final one there is implementing a compensation plan which incorporates 3 key elements into our pay plan. That's market-based pay, department service, and performance pay, as were identified and approved by the Commission as part of our 2018 compensation plan deliverables. So as you can see from the list, there are 3 key deliverables in FY20. And as I said, those 3 deliverables tie into that final phase there with performance-based pay in FY21. This slide provides an overview of the team's continued work, but is certainly not a total representation of the complexity and scope of these ambitious projects. The slide also shows the team's continued emphasis on regular communications with all staff regarding project progress. The team will be bringing final recommendations for FY20 deliverables to the Director's Office, Division Chiefs, and Unit Chiefs in the latter part of February. And with Director's Office approval in February, we will begin rollout of all 3 of the FY20 deliverables. Training for the new performance management system and individual development plan will begin in May. and we will look to launch additional non-monetary rewards by the end of the fiscal year. Once the final plans are edited and approved, we will continue to update the commission throughout the change implementation process. Per the Commission's implementation of the department-wide job study in July of 2018, the Department of Conservation has moved to a market-based salary approach. And what that means is we are going out, we are surveying, and with the help of our consultant CBIZ, we established the pay ranges for each of our jobs based upon what our competitors are paying in both private and public sector for like work and in like jobs. So it's not simply a match to job titles. We're making sure they're acquiring similar duties and the knowledge, skills, and abilities required to perform those duties so that we're truly matching apples to apples, not 3 times, just once, whenever we're setting up those market rates. It also means the salary ranges can't remain static. The influences of market pressure on salaries, from changes to minimum wage, to inflation, to what our competitors are paying for talent, must continue to be addressed on a regular, ongoing basis. For us to remember, those ranges were established with the 25th percentile of the market for the minimum, the 50th for the midpoint, and the 75th for the maximum. So we need to keep up with the price of labor, the cost of labor ongoing as we work our way through the compensation plan. So as we just discussed, market pricing established the salary ranges. However, department service and performance-based pay will be recommended to drive progression into the salary ranges. We're still finalizing the FY20 pay plan recommendations, and as I said earlier, we'll provide those to you as part of our FY20 recommendations at the April meeting. Other considerations, and certainly a key part of the Commission's investment in staff, is the Missouri State Employees Retirement System, or MOSERS. As we've discussed with you in prior meetings, the MOSERS contribution has continued to increase and has been set at 21.77% for FY20. This amount is expected to increase to about 25% of payroll by FY26 and then slowly decrease. 1% increase in the contribution on the MOSERS side equates to approximately $1 million in additional investment to the department and to her employees. Fortunately, on the health insurance side, the plan has continued to perform exceptionally well in recent years and has required no additional premium contributions by the Commission other than a 2% increase in calendar year 2016. So, and that's clearly above average. We've talked about that, and that is definitely a credit to the board that we have and the advice that we're getting from our partners on the health insurance side. So we're mindful of that as we put together the complete recommendations for personal services in FY20. That concludes my update and brief overview. I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Tom. Commissioners, questions and comments?
Tom, I'm delighted that we have a straightforward, clear plan to follow as we make the most important investment we make as commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bedell? Tom, I just want to point out that, once again, this department's leading the way. The rest of state government is following the same type of compensation plan with the market-based approach. So,
Right.
once again, thank you to you and staff for leading the way. And then also for the comparison of our MOSERS increases versus how well our department manages their limited funds. So appreciate that as well.
Right. Thank you, Madam
They do
Chair.
good work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Jennifer, another action item. Drones.
Drones, unmanned aerial systems.
Yes.
So as you are aware, the department staff have prepared a new policy, has made a presentation at the last commission meeting that would set procedures regarding unmanned aerial systems in our resource policy manual. The policy and procedures include specific guidelines for the use of these systems, commonly referred to as drones, on department-owned or managed lands. The policy also includes the process that department staff will use to request the use of unmanned aerial systems and technology to conduct our conservation work. With that, I bring forward the action item for approval of our unmanned aerial system or drone use as a new policy in the resource policy manual.
Commissioners, motion to
I'll make
approve?
a motion to accept as presented. A lot of work went into that.
And second.
Second.
And thank you for staff.
Oh, yes,
From the
thanks
previous
absolutely goes,
presentation.
yes.
Very well thought out. And
Staff
all
in
in
every
favor
division.
of this motion?
Yes,
Aye. Aye.
Great,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Very
Motion
well
passes.
presented. thank you.
Thanks for the good work.
Probably be in sharp contrast to this report.
Aaron, welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Excellent presentations today. I just want to provide a brief legislative update. In your packet, there's a list of some of the legislation that we're tracking this year. First and foremost, our poaching bill, House Bill 2060, was voted out of committee last week. That will now move to the Rules Committee. We also saw Senate Bill 356, introduced by Senator Mike Bernskoetter from here in Jeff City, which is the Senate companion of that bill that was introduced this week. We're also working with the Nature Conservancy right now to address an issue related to prescribed burning. If an individual wanted to be a prescribed burn contractor here in Missouri and get insurance, they cannot get insurance here in Missouri because liability is not defined. So working with the Nature Conservancy, we're expecting a bill to be introduced this week or this next week in the House, and we're still seeking a Senate sponsor of that bill. A couple other bills that we're tracking, one dealing with online sales tax, Senate Bill 46, introduced by Senator Koenig from St. Charles, and House Bill 548, introduced by Representative Eagleston from Northwest Missouri. This would address the June Supreme Court decision related to the Amazon case and the collection of online sales tax here in the state of Missouri. The Senate bill was voted out of committee last week. The House bill had a hearing last week. In discussions with Representative Eggleston, he would like his bill to remain revenue neutral, which would require the department to basically hand over any sales tax gained. I don't think that would be, I would not recommend the commission supporting that position. In addition, it would likely be unconstitutional. Also following House Bill 572, which would establish a hunter education program in every school in the state. This kind of got a little bit of attention after Iowa promoted that they had one school district that started to require hunter education. We have 150 schools here in the state that are offering hunter education, not through a mandate, but voluntarily through our conservation agents and our hunter education volunteers. House Joint Resolution 18, which would sunset the conservation sales tax, introduced by Representative Moon. That has not been assigned to a committee. Also tracking House Joint Resolution 20, right to hunt legislation, which has been around for years. Commissioner Murphy is well aware of some of the testimony. This would create a constitutional right to hunt, fish, and trap. This does absolutely nothing to address hunter recruitment, invasive species problems, habitat fragmentation, and really create some legal challenges for the department. Arkansas recently passed a constitutional right to hunt. They were immediately sued by individuals that had their hunting privileges revoked, and their duck hunters sued them over their managed waterfowl system that they had. So this would create several legal challenges. We already have a commission that has constitutional authority, and in this case, you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole, and it just doesn't work here in Missouri. Also tracking House Joint Resolution 32, which deals with property tax payments that state agencies make, primarily the Department of Conservation and state parks. As you're well aware, since 1980, the department has made a payment in lieu of tax based on the unimproved value of the property. That payment is no less than at the time of acquisition. In the case of this legislation, it would actually hurt counties. Because if we would raise a building or a structure off of the property, their tax payment would be off that assessed value. So without that structure, their payment would go down significantly. It would also require the assessor in the county to go out there and assess the value of all that land, which we have a very simple system that works very well today. The commission reviews those payments to counties every 5 years to make sure that they're getting their fair share. Also, this last week, we finished up our Senate appropriations hearing and our House budget hearing. I really want to give thanks to Director Pauly and our 2 deputy directors and Andrew. It was definitely a team effort, all of us moving in the same direction, and a little stressful at times, but we came out all right. Right now, we're 5 weeks down, 14 more to go, for those of who are counting. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Aaron. Questions or comments? Commissioner
Yes,
Woodall?
I do, sir, if I might. In both of the bills of 260 and Senate Bill 356, where it says make restitution to the state for that poaching, do they specify a dollar amount? What's the value of that turkey?
So in both bills are identical, have identical language. What the language is in addition to the Class A misdemeanor, which a Class A misdemeanor is a maximum fine of $2,000 and/or a year up in jail, a judge may impose an additional penalty, restitution, in the amount of $750 in the case of wild turkey, $1,500 for paddlefish, $2,000 for white-tailed deer, and up to $5,000 for elk and bear. The goal of this is not to hammer an individual, but to get them to think before they become a poacher.
Okay, in the statement of the department's position, it says that we could testify in favor or for informational purposes. Are we testifying in favor of those?
We did testify in favor of Senate or House Bill 260.
Yes. Okay, because that makes it appear that maybe we'll just do it for informational purposes. And I thought we were really the ones that was pushing that legislation.
We are, Commissioner. Sometimes you just gotta weigh the feel of the room as to whether you should testify in favor or for informational purposes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
And last but not least, other matters of interest, which follows the legislative report that had an impact here. And since, as of last Tuesday, the commission no longer has a secretary. And our bylaws require us to elect a new secretary to finish out Commissioner Wood's term. So I would entertain nominations. And Commissioner Murphy, can you help us?
I nominate Commissioner Bedell.
Any other nominations?
I move the motion's closed.
Yes, I have a nomination I'd like to place. I'd like
Yes,
to
sir.
nominate Dave Murphy to serve both as
I'm already vice chair.
and secretary. I'm just kidding.
So we do have one nomination on the floor. And hearing none others, all in favor of Don Bedell to be Commissioner Secretary? Aye. Opposed?
No.
The motion passes. Congratulations, Don.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, guys.
And thank you, staff, for all your hard work.
Amen.
A lot of work went into all these presentations that we have seen here.
Very good.
Just today, not to mention all the other activities that are going on that were not presented today. So we appreciate it, and thank you, and stay warm. Thank you, guys.
Great.
We are adjourned.
Very good job, Madam Chair.